What if I told you that one of the most misunderstood tribes in Philippine history might actually be the reason the country exists as we know it today? We're talking about a people who built a trade empire before the Spaniards even knew where the Pacific Ocean was. A people who fought the first major naval battle against European colonizers and lost. A people who were later branded with a slur, Dugong Aso, or blood of dogs, because they helped capture the first president of the Republic. But here's the thing. History is usually written by the victors, right? And usually the victors leave out the messy, bloody parts. Like, did you know that the so-called betrayal of President Aguinaldo was actually a revenge plot? A cold-blooded payback for a massacre that happened inside a burning church 2 years earlier. It's basically Game of Thrones, but in the swamps of central Luzon. From the riverbanks of the Rio Grande to the ash-covered roofs of Bacolor, this isn't just a boring history lesson. This is a story about survival, about being buried alive, literally, and digging your way out. We're going to look at the genetics, the betrayals, the insane food culture, and the angry gods that threw mountains at each other. Buckle up. We are diving deep into the untold origin story of the Kapampangans. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around for the part where they hide a 12-meter tall church inside a volcano's vomit. Let's get into it. Okay, let's start at the very beginning. And I don't mean Spanish arrival beginning. I mean way back. The name Kapampangan comes from the root word pampang, which literally means riverbank. So they are the people of the riverbank. Now compare that to their neighbors, the Tagalogs. Taga-ilog, people from the river. Sounds similar, right? But here's the twist. Linguists, the people who study words for a living, tell us that Kapampangan and Tagalog are not siblings. They're more like cousins who haven't spoken in 1,000 years. See, the Kapampangan language is weirdly distinct. For one, have you ever noticed they don't use the letter H? It's not because they're lazy, it's because their language evolved to drop the sound entirely. In Tagalog, wind is hangin. In Kapampangan, angin. In Tagalog, king is hati. In Kapampangan, ati. It's efficient. Why breathe extra air when you don't have to? But the real smoking gun is the word for rice. Tagalog says kanin. Kapampangan says nasi. That word, nasi, connects them directly to Malay and Bahasa Indonesia. Think nasi goreng. It shows that while Tagalog was doing its own thing, Kapampangan was holding on to some very old, deep Austronesian roots. Science tells us their ancestors were maritime pioneers who sailed down from Taiwan, bringing pottery and distinct genetics that mixed with the indigenous Atas. They were a power couple of sailors and survivors. Now, picture this area before the Spanish arrived. It wasn't a jungle, it was a wealthy trade hub. Some historians call it the Kingdom of Lusong. We have receipts, literally. Archaeological digs in Porac found tons of high-end Chinese and Thai ceramics dating back to the 9th century. You don't find that stuff unless you have serious money. They were trading wax, honey, and gold for porcelain. They were so famous that in feudal Japan, the samurai prized these specific clay jars called Ruson Zukuri, literally Luzon made. Imagine a feudal Japanese lord flexing his made in Pampanga jar to his friends. Oh, this, just my imported Ruson ware. But they didn't just make pots, they made weapons. Enter Panday Pita, a legendary blacksmith. The Kapampangans were expert cannon makers. They forged lantakas, bronze swivel guns. When the Spanish eventually conquered Manila, they didn't destroy the foundry. They realized, whoa, these guys make better cannons than we do, and hired them. But all that wealth attracted the wrong kind of attention. In 1571, the Spanish conquistador Miguel López de Legazpi sailed into Manila Bay. The Tagalog rulers of Manila and Tondo, Lacandula and Raja Matanda, made a calculation. They saw the Spanish firepower and decided to make a deal. They surrendered to save their people. But up north, in the delta of the Pampanga River, there was a young chieftain in Macabebe who heard about this surrender, and he was not having it. Quick pause. I want to ask you guys a question. If a foreign power showed up at your door with superior weapons, would you sign a treaty to save your people like the Tagalogs did, or would you fight to the death to keep your independence, even if you might lose? Pause the video and let me know in the comments. Treaty or war? I'm genuinely curious. Okay, back to the story. So, this young chieftain, history later named him Tarik Sulayman, sails down to Tondo with 40 warships. He marches into the house where the Tagalog kings are entertaining the Spanish, and he basically roasts them. He jeers at them for submitting. When the Spanish offer him peace, Tarik Sulayman draws his sword, jumps out of the window. Yes, he didn't even use the stairs. He literally jumped out the window and lands in his boat. He screams, "May the sun split my body in two if I ever become a friend to these Spaniards." That is a mic drop moment. He challenges them to a fight at the Bangkusay Channel. But here's the tragedy. The Spanish commander tied his ships together to create a stable platform for his musketeers. The Kapampangans swarmed the ships, expecting a melee, but the Spanish just picked them off with rifles from a distance. Tarik Sulayman was shot and killed. With their leader gone, the fleet scattered. The resistance was broken. And this is where the story takes a dark turn. After that crushing defeat, the Kapampangans made a pragmatic choice. They respected strength. The Spanish realized these guys were incredible fighters, so they recruited them. For the next 300 years, the Kapampangans became the mercenaries of the Spanish Empire. They fought the Dutch, the British, and the Chinese pirates. They were the super citizens of the colony, earning titles and privileges that other tribes didn't get. They were the muscle behind the Spanish throne. This is where the slur Dugong Aso comes from. It implies a dog-like loyalty to a master. But was it just blind loyalty? Not exactly. In 1660, when the Spanish pushed too hard, demanding too much timber and not paying for rice, the Kapampangans revolted. Led by Francisco Maniago, they blocked the rivers with stakes to starve Manila. They almost brought the Spanish to their knees until the governor-general used the classic divide-and-conquer tactic, bribing a rival chieftain to switch sides. Fast forward 2 centuries to the Philippine Revolution against Spain. The Tagalogs rise up, but the town of Macabebe, they stayed loyal to Spain. They saw the Katipunan as a Tagalog threat. And then the darkest event happens. In April 1899, General Antonio Luna's revolutionary forces retreated through Macabebe. They burned the town. But they didn't just burn houses. They herded hundreds of townspeople into the San Nicolas de Tolentino church and set it on fire. 300 people, men, women, children, burned alive inside their own place of worship by their own countrymen. Imagine that. This wasn't just war, this was a massacre. So when the Americans arrived a few months later looking for allies against Aguinaldo, the Macabebes didn't join them because they loved America. They joined because they wanted vengeance against the men who burned their families. This sets the stage for the most famous betrayal in Philippine history, the capture of Aguinaldo. The American General Frederick Funston hatched a plan straight out of a movie. He used Macabebe Scouts disguised as revolutionaries pretending to bring American prisoners to Aguinaldo's hideout in the remote mountains of Palanan. It was the ultimate Trojan horse. They marched for days, starving. When they reached the camp, Aguinaldo's guards welcomed them. Then, at a signal, the Macabebes opened fire. A Macabebe officer tackled Aguinaldo. The president was captured. The First Republic fell. To the Tagalogs, it was treason. To the Macabebes, it was justice for the burning of their church. History is never black and white. It's red. We've covered the wars of men. Now we need to talk about the wars of the gods. If you drive through Pampanga, you see Mount Araya dominating the plain. Legend says it's the home of Aring Sinukuan, the sun god. But across the plains lived Apung Namalyari, the god of Mount Pinatubo, and these two giants, they had major beef. The myths say they had a stone-throwing contest. Namalyari hurled boulders at Arayat, shattering its peak, which is why Arayat looks jagged. To retaliate, Sinukuan threw a massive rock, some say a stone mortar, that hit Pinatubo so hard it flattened the top, creating a crater. It's a cool story to explain the landscape, but in 1991, the myth became a terrifying reality. Mount Pinatubo had been asleep for 500 years. Most people didn't even know it was a volcano. But in June 1991, the giant woke up. It was the second largest eruption of the 20th century. It blasted 10 cubic kilometers of rock into the sky. And because the universe has a dark sense of humor, a typhoon hit on the same day. Rain mixed with ash to create concrete mud falling from the sky. This created Lahar. It's not water, it's liquid cement. It flows hot, fast, and destroys everything in its path. The town of Bacolor, known as the Athens of Pampanga for its culture and history, was right in the way. Over the next few years, Lahar flows buried the town not just by a few inches, but by 20 feet. Imagine your two-story house becoming a bungalow overnight. Houses disappeared. Only the roofs were visible. The historic San Guillermo Church, built in 1576, was buried halfway up its facade. Most people would have abandoned the town, but the people of Bacolor, they refused. Led by their priest, Father Jesus Manabat, and the community, they decided that if they couldn't lift the church, they would adapt to it. They dug out the main altar and the statues. They chipped away the hardened lahar. Since the floor was now meters higher, they turned the choir loft into the new sanctuary and the windows into the new doors. Today, it's known as the Sunken Church. It is half buried, but it is fully alive. It's a physical symbol of the Kapampangan spirit. And that brings us to the climax of this culture: resilience. In Kapampangan, there is a deep word called taruk. It means to fathom or measure the depth of water. It implies that true understanding requires going deep. The Kapampangans have been tested by deep waters, by fire, by war, and by liquid rock. They survived the migration across the ocean. They built a wealthy trade kingdom. They fought the Spanish when others surrendered. They endured the label of traitor when they were actually fighting for their own justice. And when a volcano tried to wipe them off the map, they just dug a new door and kept praying. So, is Dugong Aso an insult? Maybe. But if blood of a dog means you are loyal to your survival, fierce in your defense, and absolutely impossible to kill, then maybe it's not an insult. Maybe it's a badge of honor. They are the Kapampangans, the people of the riverbank who refused to be washed away. If you learned something new today, smash that like button. If you're Kapampangan, shout out your town in the comments. I want to see if we have any Macabebes or Bacaloreños watching. Share this video so we can correct the history books. Thanks for watching and keep digging deep. See you in the next one.